last year there was this promotional video for Hilton hotels that hit the internet.
Oh, right. The one with Deepika Padukone.
Exactly, the Deepika Padukone video. And I mean, within just a matter of weeks, it didn't just go viral. It completely like shattered the ceiling of what we thought was even mathematically possible on a social platform.
Yeah, the numbers were just absurd.
It hit 1.9 billion views.
Just wild.
I mean, 1.9 billion. We were literally talking about, a quarter of the human population watching a single piece of short form video.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that scale.
Right. And here's the kicker. It wasn't some CGI-heavy, massive, Super Bowl-level cinematic masterpiece.
No, not
It felt incredibly native, like it felt conversational. And it completely outperformed these massive Western ad campaigns that honestly cost probably 10 times as much to produce.
Oh, it absolutely leveled them. I mean, it left every marketing executive and honestly every content creator in the world just staring at their screens asking the exact same question, which was basically, what just happened?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because, if you're stepping into the reality of scrolling through social media in 2026, the contrast is just jarring.
It really is.
You have these massive, record-breaking anomalies like that on one side, and then on the other side, for, everyday creators and brands, there's just this shared agonizing frustration because the old rules of getting noticed online are completely dead.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah.
I mean, think about 3 years ago, right? You could put a decent piece of content out there, you use the right hashtags, hit the right, posting window.
Yeah, the golden hour or whatever.
Right, exactly. And you'd predictably get a hit of public engagement. But now, you post something, you spend a week editing, and it honestly feels like you're just screaming into a vacuum.
Totally. The machine just like stares blankly back at you.
Yeah. Which leads to this pervasive feeling of sudden invisibility. I hear this all the time. People are looking at their plummeting public counts and they're assuming their audience has abandoned them or that the algorithm is, actively punishing them.
But neither of those things is actually true, right?
No, not at all.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. So welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are cracking open the hood on 2026 social media.
Yeah, we've got a lot to cover.
We really do. We've gone through this massive stack of leaked engineering documents, recent architectural blueprints from Meta's development teams, deep dive psychological behavioral analyses, and global market trend data.
The whole stack.
The whole stack. And our mission here is singular. We want to decode exactly how the modern AI ecosystem actually works right now.
Yeah.
Why it fundamentally changed and how whether you're running a massive brand or, building a solo community, how you can leverage this entirely new machinery.
Because the system hasn't stopped working. It has just fundamentally changed what it values. And I think, more importantly, how it evaluates that value. We've essentially shifted from a transactional model to a behavioral one.
So here's the blueprint for where we're heading over the next hour or so. First, we're going to expose the hidden AI architecture that's actively running the platform, specifically these two massive systems called Andromeda and GEM.
Yeah, the overlords.
The AI overlords, exactly. And we're going to break down why the very concept of targeting has basically flipped upside down. Then we'll explore why the definition of engagement has completely abandoned the public square and retreated into the private world of direct messages.
The private shift is so huge.
It's massive. And we're going to dissect the brutal psychology of the 3-second rule and why human speech is suddenly outperforming, trending music.
Which nobody saw coming.
Right. Then we'll examine the absolute dominance of what they call lo-fi authentic content and the psychological frameworks behind it. And finally, we're going to circle back to that Deepika Padukone video to understand why the massive Indian market and the rise of Hinglish are quite literally writing the training data for the global algorithm.
It's a really complex, beautiful, and honestly sometimes terrifying intersection of raw computational power and intimate human psychology.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I feel like we need to start by just grounding ourselves in the sheer scale of the landscape. Right now, across Instagram and Facebook, there are over 200 billion reels played daily.
200 billion.
200 billion.
Yeah.
That number is so large it almost loses meaning.
Yeah, it's astronomical.
I mean, half of all the time spent on Instagram is now dedicated entirely to short-form video. So before we can even begin to strategize about, what kind of content you should be making, we have to deeply understand the machine that is deciding who sees those 200 billion videos.
And that is the most critical starting point, I think.
Mm.
Too many people are trying to apply 2023 marketing logic to a 2026 infrastructure.
Yeah, totally.
The algorithm you thought you understood is dead. Like, we are no longer in the era of audience segmentation. We are officially in the era of algorithmic retrieval.
Right. Algorithmic retrieval. And to understand retrieval, we have to meet the new AI overlords.
Mm,
Let's talk about Andromeda.
let's do it.
Because Meta started deploying this completely overhauled infrastructure in late 2024, and by 2025, it had completely taken over the ecosystem. But I want to push back on something right away, though, because when I was going through the engineering data, there was this massive emphasis on hardware.
Oh, yeah, the server chips.
Exactly. Pages and pages about NVIDIA GH200 Grace Hopper super chips and Meta's custom MTIA silicon.
Right.
I'm just sitting there like, why do we care about the server racks? How does the hardware actually impact the person sitting at home trying to just, get their video seen?
It's a great question, actually. And the answer is that the hardware dictates what is literally possible for the software to perceive. Okay.
So think about it like this. In the old days, say, I don't know, 5 years ago, how did a platform know who to show an ad to?
You just pick them in a menu, right?
Exactly.
Right.
It relied on text-based database querying. You, as the advertiser, would go into a dashboard and say, find me women aged 25 to 45 living in Atlanta who have expressed an interest in yoga.
Oh, right.
The computer just ran a simple search query through a text database. It was cheap, it required very little computing power, and it was highly linear.
So it's essentially just matching tags, like, I don't know, looking up a book in a library index.
Precisely, just matching text. But then, obviously, short-form video took over the world. And you can't just search a video using simple text queries and get a nuanced result. You need the AI to actually watch the video.
Right, because the text description doesn't really tell you what the vibe of the video is.
Exactly. And not just watch it, but understand the context, the emotional tone, the micro-expressions on the creator's face, the pacing of the cuts, the color palette.
And doing that in milliseconds for 200 billion videos a day requires a level of computational horsepower that old servers simply could not handle.
So that's where the Grace Hopper super chips come in.
Exactly. This new hardware allowed Meta to increase their model capacity by 10,000 times.
10,000. Not 10 times.
10,000, yeah. It was a staggering, almost civilization-level leap in processing power. And what this power allowed Meta to build is Andromeda, which is this AI-driven, highly personalized retrieval engine.
And this is where the entire concept of targeting flips on its head. Honestly, this was my biggest aha moment in the research. Because of that 10,000x increase in power, Andromeda doesn't look at the audience first anymore. It looks at the content first.
It has to, because Andromeda understands that demographic targeting is actually incredibly flawed.
How so?
Well, just because two people are 35-year-old women in Atlanta doesn't mean they want to watch the exact same video at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. I mean, human desire is fluid. So instead of looking for demographics, Andromeda scans the creative DNA of your video.
The creative DNA.
Yeah, it uses computer vision to extract thousands of features. The lighting, the syntax of the speech, the aesthetic vibe. It maps all of this into what they call a high-dimensional vector space.
Okay, so wait. That means my content is the targeting.
Yes, exactly. Your creative identity, your camera angles, your visual patterns, that is the targeting now. Andromeda extracts the semantic meaning of your video, and then, in literally fractions of a second, it scans billions of users to find the exact individuals whose behavioral patterns from, say, the last 20 minutes indicate they are primed for that specific emotional or educational frequency.
Wow.
It completely ignores whether they're a 20-year-old college student in Tokyo or a 60-year-old retired mechanic in Ohio. If their behavioral vector matches your video's creative vector, Andromeda retrieves your content and serves it to them.
That fundamentally changes the job of a marketer or a creator. You aren't buying audiences anymore. You are engineering signals.
Perfectly said.
But Andromeda isn't working alone, right? Sitting above this retrieval engine is a system called GEM, the Generative Ads Model. And the engineering documentation refers to GM as an LLM-inspired central brain. But I'll be honest, this tripped me up initially.
The LLM part.
Yeah, because LLM stands for Large Language Model. It's what powers things like ChatGPT. So how does a language model apply to a visual platform like Instagram?
Yeah, it requires a bit of a paradigm shift in how we think about language, because we usually think of language as words, right? Nouns, verbs, sentences. But an LLM at its absolute core is just an incredibly powerful sequence predictor. It
Okay.
looks at a string of data and predicts what comes next with terrifying accuracy. Meta realized that human behavior on a social app is also just a sequence.
Oh, interesting.
Right, like if you watch a reel about coffee for 4 seconds, then you scroll past a political post in half a second, you like a photo of a dog, you send a meme to a friend in a DM, that is a sequence of actions.
So GEM is treating my behavior like a sentence
hmm
and basically trying to predict the next word.
Exactly. GEM looks at the vast, chaotic ocean of human interaction across the entire meta ecosystem: ads, organic content, reels, stories, threads, and it identifies these massive, complex behavioral patterns. It predicts what people are going to do next before they even know they want to do it.
That's a little scary, honestly.
It is. But here's the catch. GEM is so massively complex that it is too slow and too expensive to make the split-second decisions for every single individual video swipe.
Right, because you can't have the biggest brain in the world micromanaging 200 billion daily decisions. It would just crash the system.
Right, which brings us to the concept of knowledge distillation. This is how GM actually influences what you see.
Okay, let's make this concrete, because knowledge distillation can sound incredibly abstract to people who aren't software engineers. So I love the Disney analogy from the sources.
Yes, that's a perfect way to explain it.
So think of it like this. Imagine GM is the world's most brilliant professor who has spent 20 years writing a dense 1,000-page textbook on human psychology and behavioral economics. GM understands everything. But Andromeda, the system actually serving the videos, is like a student who only has 3 seconds to take a test.
Right, Andromeda doesn't have time to read the 1,000-page textbook.
Exactly. So GM's job is to read the textbook and distill all of that massive, complex knowledge into a flawless one-page cheat sheet, and it hands that cheat sheet to Andromeda.
The smaller, faster models. G is the teacher, and Andromeda is the active student applying the lessons in real time.
And that's why they saw such a huge bump in performance, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This distillation process is why Meta saw a 5% increase in global conversion rates almost overnight, and why the whole system became 4 times more efficient at predicting what users actually wanted to see.
But there is a missing link here, I think. Because if GM is the teacher and Andromeda is the student taking the test, who is writing the curriculum, like, how does the system ensure that what you do on Facebook feed informs what you see on Instagram Reels? Because for a long time, those were entirely separate silos.
They really were, and that was a massive vulnerability for Meta in the past. If you engaged with a brand on Instagram, the Facebook ad algorithm often had no idea. But they solved this with a new infrastructure layer called Lattice.
Right. Lattice is the great unifier.
Exactly. Lattice is the unified decision-making architecture that sits beneath all of this. It ensures that the ecosystem learns together. It allows the signals from a user watching a reel to seamlessly flow over and inform how an ad is served on Facebook or how a story is ranked. It breaks down the internal walls so the AI has this holistic 360-degree view of the user.
And we really can't talk about this architecture without bringing up the ultimate reality check built into the system, which is UTIS.
Yes, the User True Interest Survey.
Because for years, algorithms relied solely on passive signals. Like if I stopped scrolling and watched a video for 15 seconds, the algorithm just assumed, oh, he loves this, show him more. But that is deeply flawed psychology.
It's what we call the train wreck fallacy.
Exactly. The train wreck fallacy, if I'm driving down the highway and I see a horrific car crash, I am going to slow down and stare. I might stare for a long time. It captures my attention entirely, but that absolutely does not mean I want my daily commute to be filled with car crashes.
Yeah.
Attention does not equal satisfaction.
Right. And that realization was a huge watershed moment for the engineering teams because they realized that optimizing purely for watch time was creating these toxic, clickbait-heavy feeds that honestly just burned users out.
Totally.
Passive signals are noisy. Like, you might leave a video playing while you look away to take a sip of coffee. So they introduced UTS. It is literally a pop-up that interrupts the user and says, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much did you value this specific post?
It's literally a test screening, like when a movie studio brings in a live audience to watch a rough cut of a film and fill out comment cards.
Yes. UTS provides explicit ground truth feedback. When a user explicitly rates a video a 5, that data is fed straight back into GEM. GM looks at the creative DNA of that highly rated video, cross-references it with the behavioral sequence of the user, and updates its predictive models.
So it's constantly self-correcting.
Exactly. UTS calibrates the entire multi-billion-dollar machine to ensure it's actually delivering human satisfaction, not just harvesting cheap attention.
So if we pull back and look at this entire AI stack, right? We've got Andromeda retrieving the content, GM predicting the behavior, Lattice unifying the data, and UTS calibrating the satisfaction.
Mhm.
What does this actually mean for you, the listener? If I am a brand trying to sell a product or a creator trying to build an audience, how do I actually operate inside this machine?
The absolute biggest takeaway is that you have to abandon the idea of hyper-specific audience control and embrace creative diversity. You have to feed the AI a buffet of signals.
Break that down for me. What happens if I don't? Like, what if I run an ad campaign the old-fashioned way, where I make one really slick commercial, I format it into a square, a vertical, and a horizontal video, and I just pump money into it?
If you do that, you are starving Andromeda.
A starving it.
Yes, because Andromeda groups visually and semantically similar content under a single entity ID. If you give it 30 videos that all have the exact same studio lighting, the same script, and the same aesthetic, Andromeda scans them, realizes they are semantically identical, and assigns them all the exact same entity ID.
Oh, wow.
So you basically just bought 30 lottery tickets with the exact same numbers. Andromeda will try to find an audience for that one specific vibe, and if it fails, your campaign just dies.
But if I diversify,
If you diversify, right, if you give the system one highly polished studio shot, one chaotic behind-the-scenes video shot on an iPhone, a text-heavy educational carousel, and maybe a humorous meme, Andromeda spans those and creates completely different entity IDs for each one.
I see.
You are giving the AI multiple distinct hooks into the global audience. It might take the studio shot and retrieve it for high-income earners browsing at night, while taking the lo-fi iPhone video and serving it to younger demographics during their morning commute. You have to give the machine the raw materials it needs to map the entire vector space of your potential market.
Okay, so we've established that this incredibly powerful AI is constantly scanning our content's DNA to match it with user signals. We know Andromeda and GM are hungry for data, but that immediately begs the next crucial question. What specific human actions do these systems actually care about?
Right.
Because we started this conversation talking about how public likes are plummeting, the vending machine is broken, you put a post in, you don't get a like out.
And the data absolutely confirms what everyone is feeling. Reports from analytics firms like Buffer and Social Insider over the last 2 years are unequivocal. Surface-level engagement, meaning public likes, public comments, and public shares to feeds, has dropped precipitously across almost every major platform.
So I have to ask the cynical question here. Is it just over? Has the attention economy reached such a point of saturation that people are simply numb? Are we all just, mindlessly zombie scrolling without actually caring about anything we see? Because if the likes are gone, the natural assumption is that the audience just doesn't care anymore.
It is the natural assumption, for sure, but it is entirely incorrect. The interest hasn't disappeared, it has migrated, it has evolved. We have to look at the psychological environment of a public feed in 2026.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the feeds have become heavily commercialized. They are optimized by AI. They are performative. Every public action you take, a like, a comment, is tracked, it's broadcast to your network, and it's used to build an advertising profile on you.
Right, everyone can see what you like.
Exactly. And when the public square feels that transactional, hyper-monitored, and frankly, saturated with polished brands, users do what humans have always done throughout history when a space becomes too crowded.
They retreat to where it's safe.
Exactly. They retreat to the safety of private spaces. And in the context of the modern internet, that means direct messages, DMs, group chats. The algorithm developers at Meta saw this shift happening, and they completely re-engineered Andromeda to prioritize what we call private engagement and satisfaction metrics.
The scale of this private shift is just staggering. When you look at the internal data, Meta revealed that Reels are reshared via DMs over 4.5 billion times per day.
4.5 billion. It's crazy.
4.5 billion, that means every single day, the equivalent of half the planet's population is watching a video, tapping that little paper airplane icon, and privately sending it to someone else.
And we really need to unpack the profound psychological weight of that action. Why does Andromeda care so much about a DM share? Because a DM is fundamentally an act of parasocial intimacy.
Parasocial intimacy. I love that framing. Explain how the AI interprets that.
Think about the friction involved. A public like is incredibly cheap. You can double tap a photo without even breaking your scrolling rhythm. It requires zero emotional investment.
Right, you just tap, and keep moving.
But when you share a reel in a DM, you are taking a deliberate action. You are deciding that a piece of content is so valuable or so hilarious or so deeply relatable to a specific relationship in your life that you are willing to interrupt your friend's day to show it to them.
Yeah, that's true.
You are attaching your own personal social reputation to that piece of content. You are saying, I endorse this.
It's the digital equivalent of, like, clipping a newspaper article and mailing it to your sister because you know she'd love it. It carries immense personal weight.
Precisely. And GEM recognizes that weight. When it sees a high velocity of DM shares on a video, it reads that as the ultimate signal of human satisfaction. It tells the system, this isn't just passively entertaining, this is socially binding.
Wow.
That is the strongest virality signal possible right now. Content that dominates the DM ecosystem is heavily amplified by the algorithm in the public discovery feeds.
And it is just DM shares, right? There's another private metric that has quietly become the gold standard for enduring value, and that is the save.
Yes, the save metric is fascinating because it measures utility over time. When a user clicks the bookmark icon to save a post, it sends a very specific semantic signal to Andromeda. It says, this content is too dense or too useful to consume in a single passing glance. I need to curate this for my future self.
It's an admission of high value. Because you don't save a meme you've already laughed at.
Yeah.
You save a tutorial on how to fix a leaky faucet, or a really complex recipe, or a breakdown of a marketing strategy.
Exactly. Educational content, step-by-step guides, cheat sheets, these formats naturally generate massive save rates. And when Andromeda sees a video generating a high ratio of saves per impression, it categorizes that content as a high-value utility asset.
Right.
It thinks, if this specific user found this valuable enough to archive, I need to analyze their behavioral vector and go find 10,000 other users with a similar semantic profile who also need this utility.
I can hear the marketers and the brand managers listening right now starting to panic a little bit.
Yeah.
Because if you're a social media manager, your boss wants to see a spreadsheet at the end of the month with numbers going up.
Yeah.
And likes and comments are visible. They're easy to track and put in a report. This private shift feels like a massive leap into basically dark social.
It is dark social.
So how do you measure success if all the real engagement is happening in hidden group chats?
You measure it by looking at reach and retention and by fundamentally shifting your calls to action. The era of saying, smash that like button or drop a comment below is honestly over. It feels desperate and outdated. You have to engineer your content for the private shift. You need to design for the share and the save.
So instead of trying to be universally liked by everyone in the feed, you have to be highly specific. Your content needs to be so hyper-relatable to a specific situation that the viewer instinctively thinks, oh my God, I have to send this to Sarah. This is exactly what we were talking about yesterday. Or it has to be so densely packed with actionable info that they think, I need to save this for my project on Sunday.
You are designing for utility and intimacy. If you hit those two notes, the invisible DM and save metrics will trigger Andromeda to exponentially increase your overall reach. The public vanity metrics might look lower than they did in 2023, but the actual impact and the distribution of the content will be vastly higher.
But of course, there's a brutal reality we have to face here. Before you can convince someone to save your tutorial or DM your joke to their best friend, you have to actually get them to stop scrolling in the first place. You have to arrest their attention. Which brings us to the architecture of virality, and specifically the psychology of the 3-second rule.
Yeah, because if Andromeda is mapping your video's DNA and serving it to the perfect user, the battle is literally won or lost in that initial frame.
Now, anyone who has worked in digital media for more than a week knows what a hook rate is. The percentage of people who watch the first 3 seconds divided by the total impressions. That isn't new. But what has changed, and what frankly blew my mind in the research, is what actually works to secure that hook in 2026.
Right.
Because if you rewind just a couple of years to the peak of the TikTok explosion, the conventional wisdom was all about trending audio. You'd find a viral song, point at some text on the screen, do a little dance, and just ride the audio wave.
That was the dominant syntax of the platform for a long time.
But the data from the analytics firm Amplify, who analyzed over 10,000 top-performing reels recently, shows a complete reversal. It isn't about the music anymore. It's about human connection.
The data is unequivocal on this. Videos that feature a human speaking directly to the camera in the first 3 seconds boost their 10-second retention rate by nearly 25%.
25%? That's huge.
It's massive. And furthermore, the sound on rate, meaning users actually unmuting the video or turning up their volume, jumps by almost 9%. This is just so counterintuitive to the flashy, hyper-edited aesthetic we usually associate with social media. On an app literally built to serve up endless dopamine hits of visual stimulation, just speaking into a lens with your raw human voice is outperforming complex edits and viral music. Why?
To understand why, we really have to look at the neurology of how we process information on a feed. When you are doom scrolling, you are in a highly passive, almost semi-hypnotic state.
Yeah, the zombie scroll.
Right. Your brain is aggressively filtering out noise. But human evolution has hardwired us to prioritize faces and voices above all other stimuli. When you swipe up and suddenly see a human face looking at you, and a voice begins to speak, it creates an immediate micromystery.
A micromystery.
Yes. Your brain instinctively registers a social interaction. It immediately asks a series of rapid-fire questions. Who is this person? Who are they talking to? What is the context of this conversation? Are they angry? Are they sharing a secret? Your brain cannot ignore the start of a human story. It forces a cognitive pause to resolve the context. And that cognitive pause translates directly into a metric that the engineers at Meta call scroll velocity deceleration, which I absolutely love this term. It sounds like astrophysics, but it's literally just measuring how fast your thumb is moving.
Exactly. Andromeda is so sophisticated that it doesn't just measure whether you watched 3 seconds. It measures the physical deceleration of the swipe. It senses the user applying the brakes.
Wow.
When a human voice creates that micro-mystery, the thumb slows down. Andromeda registers that deceleration, cross-references it with the semantic presence of human speech, and flags the content as a high-value storytelling asset.
And it isn't just verbal hooks, though. The research highlights some fascinating visual psychology as well. They talk about dramatic reveal transitions.
Oh, yeah. This is a visual jolt designed to reset the viewer's attention span. A creator might physically cover the lens with their hand or do a hard stomp or jump, and the moment they make contact, the scene instantly cuts to a new location or a new outfit.
Right? It's exploiting our hardwired response to sudden movement.
Yeah.
But the visual hook that I found most interesting was the shift in framing, the absolute dominance of the off-axis talking shot.
Yes. This is a brilliant, really subtle manipulation of social dynamics. For years, the standard way to shoot a video was to stare dead center into the lens, like a news anchor delivering a broadcast.
Right.
But that syntax feels formal. It feels like a lecture.
It feels like an advertisement.
Exactly. But when a creator sets the camera slightly to the side and looks off-axis, perhaps looking at a laptop or seemingly talking to someone just out of frame, it changes the psychological relationship with the viewer entirely.
Because it feels like you're intruding.
Right. It feels unscripted. It feels like you, the viewer, are eavesdropping on a candid private moment. It removes the pressure of being spoken to and replaces it with the intrigue of observing.
Which is a perfect segue into the next massive tectonic shift in the ecosystem. Because simply putting a human face on camera and speaking isn't enough anymore. How that human presents themselves is making or breaking campaigns right now.
Very true.
If human speech is outperforming music, then raw authenticity is utterly destroying high production polish. We are living in the golden age of what the trend reports call lo-fi authentic content.
This is perhaps the most difficult pill for traditional brands to swallow. There is a massive cultural rejection of polished advertising happening across the globe. Internal surveys show that 50% of Instagram users explicitly state they prefer humorous, unpolished, raw reels over highly produced cinematic videos.
Okay, I want to push back on this because I can hear the creative directors out there screaming.
Oh, I'm sure.
If I'm running a luxury brand, say I'm selling $5,000 watches or high-end sports cars, am I really supposed to shoot my campaigns on a shaky iPhone in a dimly lit room? Does lo-fi actually scale across all industries, or is this just a tactic for 19-year-old influencers in their bedrooms?
It is a critical question, and the answer requires nuance. Lo-fi does not mean low effort or garbage quality. It means adopting the native syntax of the platform.
Okay, so what does that look like for a watch brand?
If you are selling a luxury watch, you obviously shouldn't shoot it in a messy bedroom. But instead of a $1 million studio shoot with robotic camera arms and dramatic voiceovers, you might shoot a crisp, beautifully lit iPhone video of a master watchmaker sitting at their actual workbench. They're wearing a loop, intimately explaining the mechanism of the tourbillon in their own unscripted words.
Ah, it's about the syntax of reality versus the syntax of a commercial.
Exactly. Think about how Andromeda's semantic indexing processes this. Andromeda sees everything, right? When it scans a video with perfect 3-point studio lighting, color graded to perfection with a professional voiceover, it semantically groups that video into the traditional advertisement vector.
And what do humans do when they encounter traditional advertisements?
We swipe past them instantly. We have developed total ad blindness.
Precisely. We have neurological calluses against being sold to.
But when Andromeda scans that video of the watchmaker at his bench with natural window light and the ambient sound of the workshop, it categorizes it as a genuine human experience. It reads as native content. And native content historically triggers much higher completion rates and trust metrics.
It's the difference between a slick salesperson in a tailored suit trapping you in a showroom versus an incredibly knowledgeable friend pulling you aside at a dinner party to enthusiastically explain how something works. One triggers your defense mechanisms, and the other triggers curiosity.
And this demand for authenticity has given rise to highly specific psychological archetypes that creators are using to build immense trust. The research highlighted several of these trend frameworks. Let's look at the brainwash you trend.
Oh, I have seen this everywhere recently. It's so incredibly clever from a psychological standpoint.
It's a masterclass in vulnerability framing. The hook typically goes like this. Unfortunately, if you spend too much time with me, I'll brainwash you into believing in yourself and actually launching that business.
The word unfortunately does so much heavy lifting there.
It's the entire fulcrum of the hook. If the creator just said, I'm going to make you successful, it sounds arrogant, it sounds like a scammy guru pitch.
Right, you instantly swipe away.
Exactly. The viewer's defense mechanisms immediately engage. But by adding unfortunately and framing it as brainwashing, it softens the confidence. It wraps a highly aspirational promise in a layer of self-deprecating humor. It frames their infectious ambition almost as a contagious side effect or a warning. It reads as supremely confident yet highly approachable.
Then there is the girl-to-girl trend, which the behavioral analysts point out is heavily rooted in regret avoidance.
Yes, this trend bridges the gap between the messy reality of the process and the aspiration of the outcome. A creator will use a trending audio that says something like, I can't believe I did that, but the visual is them achieving something immensely difficult, like running a marathon, or standing in a warehouse full of their product, or graduating.
It's disguised as a personal diary entry. It strips away the polished success story and emphasizes the shock and vulnerability of the journey. It offers the viewer a roadmap to aspiration without making them feel inadequate.
And we see the absolute pinnacle of relatable, unscripted content in the headphone swap trend.
Oh, the walking down the street ones.
Yes, two friends walking down the street, they swap headphones to hear what the other person is currently listening to, and their genuine, surprised reactions are captured on camera. It relies entirely on the awkwardness and reality of social contrast.
It's the ultimate rejection of the script,
Yeah.
which ties into this broader macro theme the research calls chaos culture. And I honestly think there is no better example of how brands can effectively participate in chaos culture than the Kit Kat heist.
This is a brilliant case study in modern corporate agility. So in Europe, an actual crime occurred where 12 tons of Kit Kat chocolate were stolen from a facility.
12 tons?
Yeah, a massive theft. In a previous era, a massive corporation like Nestle would have issued a stiff, legally approved press release from a PR firm condemning the theft.
They would have tried to control the narrative.
Exactly. But the internet doesn't want controlled narratives. The internet wants chaos. Users immediately started treating this real-world theft like a Hollywood heist movie. They were making memes, casting the actors, plotting how you even physically move 12 tons of chocolate.
And instead of shutting it down, Kit Kat leaned in. They participated in the joke natively. They referenced their own "have a break" slogan in the context of the robbers needing a break. They joined the lo-fi, meme-driven conversation.
Which forces a very uncomfortable question for traditional brands. Are you desperately trying to maintain an illusion of pristine control, or are you willing to actually participate in the humorous, messy reality of the internet? Because Andromeda heavily rewards participation.
Okay, so we've established the power of this lo-fi, authentic, highly relatable approach. But to see the strategy operating at its absolute maximum potential, where the 3-second human hook, the unpolished vibe, and the algorithm's thirst for retention all perfectly align to create world-shaking numbers, we have to return to the story we opened the show with.
The Deepika Padukone video.
Exactly. We have to look at the market that is literally shaping the global algorithm right now. We have to look at India.
If you are not paying attention to the Indian social media market in 2026, you are missing the engine room of the global internet. The scale is difficult to fully comprehend. India currently has 472.6 million Instagram users.
That is insane.
It is by far the largest market in the world, eclipsing the US, Brazil, and Europe.
Nearly 500 million people on a single platform. And that sheer volume of human behavior is exactly why that Deepika Padukone Hilton video hit 1.9 billion views. But I really want to dig into the why, because it wasn't just that she is incredibly famous. Famous people post videos that flop all the time.
All the time.
What is the specific blueprint working in India that is so effective it is actually training GEM and Andromeda for the rest of the world?
It comes down to three core pillars of native integration. First, there is the masterful use of Bollywood audio-led formats. In India, music isn't just background noise, it is the emotional connective tissue of the culture. When a new track drops, creators instantly use it to score their own emotional narratives, creating these hyper-viral, localized trends.
And the second pillar is the meme-led relatability.
Yes. The Indian audience deeply rewards content that taps into shared cultural friction. Reels that humorously address the intense pressure of university exams, or the chaos of multi-generational family dynamics, or the nuances of festival shopping. It is that lo-fi authentic preference dialed up to a massive scale.
And the third pillar is how they handle commerce, the rise of creator-led direct-to-consumer, or D2C, content.
Brands like Mama Earth and Minimalist realized very early on that polished studio commercials were failing, so they shifted massive budgets directly to creators. But they don't dictate scripts. The creators shoot raw, phone-based product demos that look exactly like a genuine recommendation a friend would send you in a DM. It leverages the parasocial intimacy we talked about earlier.
But the most fascinating aspect of the India blueprint, the thing that I think holds the most profound lesson for creators anywhere in the world, is the linguistic evolution. The absolute explosion of Hinglish.
Oh, yeah. Hinglish is a beautiful, organic adaptation to the platform. It is a fluid, rapid-fire blend of Hindi and English. It is exactly how urban, younger demographics in India actually speak in coffee shops and at work.
The research highlighted educational creators like Saurav Jain and Digital Pratik. These are guys who have built massive communities, hundreds of thousands of highly engaged followers, teaching really complex marketing and business concepts. But they don't do it in stiff formal English, and they don't do it in purely traditional Hindi. They teach in English.
And that choice is a strategic masterstroke. Think about the friction of language. When an expert speaks in highly formal, jargon-heavy language, they establish authority, but they sacrifice intimacy. They build a wall.
Right, it feels like school.
Exactly. By teaching in Hinglish, these creators instantly dismantle that wall. They remove the friction of the lecture and replace it with the warmth of a peer-to-peer conversation.
It feels like an older brother explaining a tough concept to you at the kitchen table. And we are seeing this strategy fragment even further with regional language hooks. A creator might open a video with a fiery, high-energy 5-second hook spoken entirely in Tamil or Telugu.
Yes.
That instantly arrests the attention of that specific regional community. It creates massive scroll velocity deceleration. Then, once they've secured the hook, they switch seamlessly into English or Hindi to deliver the broader educational payoff to a wider audience.
It is a phenomenal manipulation of the 3-second rule, using cultural identity as the hook.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Why does a social media manager in New York or a solo creator in London need to care about English or Tamil language hooks? If they aren't selling to the Indian market, isn't this just like an interesting piece of trivia?
Absolutely not. It is critical because the algorithm learns from volume. Because the Indian market is so impossibly vast, the engagement behaviors of those 472 million users, their strong preference for unpolished, culturally relevant, bilingual, authentic content, serve as the primary training data for GM.
Ah, they are writing the cheat sheet.
Exactly. GM watches billions of interactions in India and learns a fundamental global truth. Raw, culturally nuanced authenticity generates higher human satisfaction than polished, sterile broadcasting. GM encodes that philosophy into its core predictive models.
Wow.
And because GM is the central intelligence orchestrating the entire meta ecosystem, those learnings subtly but powerfully influence how content is ranked, evaluated, and retrieved in New York, in London, in Tokyo.
That is wild. The algorithm is not just a cold mathematical formula. It's literally a mirror reflecting human culture back at us. And the lesson is universal. Authenticity is a semantic signal that Andromeda recognizes and rewards, regardless of whether you're speaking English in Mumbai or English in Chicago. If you can tap into the hyperlocal nuances of your specific community, you can achieve borderless reach.
Right, you don't have to speak English to apply the lesson. The lesson is to speak the true, unfiltered language of your audience rather than the sterilized language of a brand.
Okay, we have covered a staggering amount of conceptual and technical ground. We've mapped out the massive AI architecture of Andromeda and GM and understood the shift to semantic retrieval. We know that private DMs and saves are the new currencies of value. We've broken down the neurology of the 3-second human hook. We've explored the psychological dominance of lo-fi vulnerability. And we've seen how the massive scale of the Indian market proves that cultural authenticity wins.
It's a lot.
It is. Now, how the hell do we actually do this? How does a brand or a single creator sitting at their desk tomorrow morning package all of this theory into a cohesive, executable strategy for 2026?
We need to build the 2026 strategy playbook. And the most practical place to start is with the biggest strategic surprise in the data. Given everything we have just spent an hour discussing regarding video, reels, and computer vision, the most powerful tool in your arsenal might actually be static.
Oh, this.
Yes!
We need to talk about the carousel comeback.
Yes! This blew my mind because the narrative everywhere is that video has devoured the world. But carousels, those multi-slide image and text posts, are quietly dominating a crucial metric.
The behavioral data shows that across every single tier of brand size, whether you have 1,000 followers or 10 million carousels, consistently generate the highest volume of saves. And as we established earlier, the save is one of the most potent signals of enduring utility you can send to Andromeda.
Why are they performing so well, though? Is it just nostalgia for photos? No, it's about active versus passive consumption. Video is inherently passive. You press play and let it wash over you. But a carousel requires active physical participation. You have to read, process, and physically swipe to the next slide.
It forces engagement.
Exactly. And more importantly, it generates massive dwell time. If a user spends 2 minutes reading through a dense 10-slide educational carousel about, say, tax strategy, Andromeda measures that extensive dwell time.
Right.
It registers that the user is deeply engaged in learning, categorizes the post as high-value utility, and aggressively pushes it to similar vectors. In 2026, the average engagement rate for carousels is 0.55%, which actually slightly edges out Reels at 0.52%.
I love this, primarily because it takes the immense pressure off. You don't have to be a manic, high-energy video performer 24/7. Carousels allow for quiet, methodical depth.
They are the textbooks of the platform. So when we look at the ideal content architecture for 2026, the data suggests a very specific structural mix.
Let's break down the ratios. What is the ideal diet to feed the algorithm?
You want to dedicate 60 to 70% of your output to Reels. Reels are your discovery engine. They are the wide net you cast into Andromeda's retrieval system to reach completely cold audiences.
Okay, 60 to 70 for discovery.
Then you allocate 20 to 30% of your output to carousels. This is your depth mechanism. This is where you prove your expertise, deliver dense utility, and rack up those high-value saves. And finally, the remaining 10% is dedicated to single images, mostly to maintain a coherent aesthetic on your profile grid and provide simple, humanizing moments.
That structural mix feeds the AI ecosystem, the diverse entity IDs we talked about earlier. But having the right mix of formats is only half the battle. You also have to understand how the different spaces within the app function together, which brings us to the concept of the Reels to Stories funnel.
This is critical. You cannot treat the whole app as one monolithic audience. People use different features for entirely different psychological reasons.
Break that landscape down for me. Where does everything fit?
If we look at the macro environment, TikTok is still functioning as the engine for rapid, unpredictable, often chaotic global discovery. But Instagram Reels have solidified their position as the premier top-of-funnel discovery tool specifically for high-spending, intent-driven demographics, particularly millennials.
Okay, so a millennial sees my reel through Andromeda's retrieval. They laugh or they learn something and they click through to my profile. But that doesn't mean they are ready to buy my course or my product. They don't know me.
Exactly. A reel generates reach, but it rarely generates immediate trust. That is where stories come in. Stories act as the relationship layer, the intimacy layer.
Because they disappear in 24 hours, the production value is inherently zero.
Yes. When that user clicks to your profile and watches your daily stories, they see the unpolished reality. They see you drinking coffee, making a mistake, answering questions off the cuff. Stories utilize vulnerability framing continuously.
Well, it builds over time.
Over the course of a few weeks, that daily low-stakes presence builds profound parasocial intimacy. It converts the initial cold reach of the reel into deep brand loyalty and ultimately Sales.
So we have reels for discovery, carousels for depth and saves, and daily stories for intimate trust. It's a beautiful, logical funnel. But let's be incredibly real for a second. If I am a solo entrepreneur or a small marketing team of 2 people, I am already exhausted just hearing that. You were telling me I need to master 3 completely different formats just to survive. Right. How do you execute this playbook without burning out in a month?
The secret to surviving the 2026 ecosystem is intelligent algorithmic repurposing. You do not need 3 separate, brilliant ideas every day. You need one core idea semantically translated for the different formats.
Okay, walk me through exactly how that looks in practice. Give me a scenario.
Let's say you are a fitness coach and you write a highly detailed 10-slide carousel breaking down the biological reasons why most people fail at marathon training. It's dense, it's educational, and it performs incredibly well, generating hundreds of saves.
A great utility asset.
Right, most creators stop there. But the playbook says you extract the core thesis of that carousel. You set up your phone, look slightly off axis to create that eavesdropping effect, and you film a fast-paced 30-second reel.
Using a hook, obviously.
Yep. You open with a human speech hook, maybe utilizing the brainwash you vulnerability framework, saying, "Unfortunately, I am going to ruin the way you train for marathons because you are making this one massive mistake." And then you deliver a condensed version of the carousel's message.
Okay, so now I have a reel and a carousel on the exact same topic.
Then the next morning, you jump onto your stories while you are actually out on a run. You are out of breath, it's completely unpolished, and you candidly tell a quick self-deprecating story about a time you made that exact marathon training mistake and hit the wall at mile 18.
That is brilliant. You're feeding Andromeda completely different entity IDs, a text-heavy asset, a highly produced video hook, and a raw, ephemeral video, but the semantic core is identical.
And this is how you hack the architecture. By feeding the system different formats of the same core message, you trigger a massive algorithmic feedback loop. Andromeda watches a user engage with your short reel, then later sees them dwell on your deep dive carousel, and then watches them reply to your raw story.
It's hitting them from all sides.
The AI synthesizes all of this and realizes your account isn't just a one-hit wonder. You are providing comprehensive, multidimensional value to that user. It maximizes your overall account authority in the vector space. You stop fighting the algorithm, and you start giving it exactly what it wants to eat.
Man, that is an absolute masterclass in modern platform architecture. You aren't just making content, you are building an integrated behavioral funnel.
It is about working in harmony with the physics of the system, rather than fighting against the ghost of algorithms past.
All right, we have covered an incredible dense amount of territory today. Let's trace the arc of the journey one last time. We started by meeting the new AI architecture Andromeda and GM, and learned that the era of demographic targeting is basically over. Instead, your creative DNA is your targeting, matched by neural networks to the behavioral vectors of billions of users.
Then we explored the evolution of human engagement, realizing that as feeds become more commercial, true value has migrated. Public lives are fading, while the private, intimate ecosystem of DM shares and profile saves has become the ultimate currency of algorithmic virality.
Right. We deconstructed the 3-second rule, discovering that the micro-mystery of a human face and voice creates scroll velocity deceleration, far outperforming slick music-only videos.
We analyzed the cultural rejection of polish, seeing how lo-fi authentic content and frameworks like vulnerability and relatable chaos build trust in a way that million-dollar ad campaigns simply cannot.
We looked at the immense power of the Indian market, where the fusion of culture and English proves that removing the friction of formal jargon and speaking the native language of your audience is the key to training global AI models.
And finally, we laid out the cohesive 2026 playbook, engineering a funnel that leverages carousels for depth and saves, short reels for top-of-funnel discovery, and raw stories to forge lasting parasocial relationships.
It is a totally new game. But before I let you go, there was one final, incredibly provocative concept buried deep in the engineering reports that we deliberately haven't touched on yet. And frankly, it feels like science fiction. But it is the reality of where this technology is heading next. It's a framework Meta calls agentic AI commerce.
This represents the final evolution of the ecosystem we've been discussing.
Right now, the relationship is still somewhat manual. We scroll, we see a reel we like, maybe we click a tagged product, we add it to a cart, and we buy it. We are still pulling the trigger. But as GEM and Andromeda reach new levels of predictive capability, Meta is preparing for a future where AI personas, Autonomous agents with internal project names like Echo Me or Pop Store will actually handle the discovery and the purchasing for you.
The AI transitions from being a passive retrieval engine to becoming an active financial agent acting on your behalf.
Exactly. Imagine this. Based entirely on the semantic signals of the reels you linger on, the aesthetic of the carousels you save, and the specific tone of the videos you share in your private DMs, these AI agents will build a perfect psychological profile of your desires.
It's wild to think about.
And they'll have a budget, they will scour the internet, curate products, suggest experiences, and literally make purchases delivered to your door, all based on the subconscious behavioral vectors you create while scrolling on the toilet.
It takes the concept of personalized semantic retrieval to its absolute, inevitable, and somewhat terrifying extreme.
It really does. So here is the ultimate question for you to ponder as you step back into the real world or as you sit down to plan your next piece of content. If we are rapidly approaching a reality where AI agents are going to curate our lives, shape our environment, and literally spend our money based purely on our micro habits and scrolling behaviors, are we shaping the algorithm with our desires, or has the algorithm gotten so good at predicting our behavior that it is now shaping us?
It is the defining tension of the modern internet, and it's a profound thought to keep in mind the next time you open the app.
It certainly makes you look at that 3-second hook in a completely different light, doesn't it? Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Take these blueprints, start experimenting with your creative vectors, stay fiercely curious, and we will see you next time.